Hey guys, my name's Ian from Ian Chalice Photography, and today I'm back with a review of the Sigma 150 to 600 sports lens. Now I've held off this review as long as I can, just because I really wanted to get hands-on with this and give it as good a test as I could before telling you my thoughts. So I'm just going to jump straight in there. The way this review is going to work is I'm just going to ramble on about some stuff, and then at the very end I'll show you some test samples and some test shots on full screen so you can look for yourself. If that's all you're interested in, feel free to just skip there now. If not, stay tuned. I'll go through features and then we'll jump on the computer, have a look at a few more pictures, and like I said, finish up with some samples. So, jumping straight in there with build quality. This lens is built pretty much entirely from an aluminium alloy, so the whole thing's metal. Unlike any other sort of external zoom lens I've used before, it does actually feel quite solid. I had the old version of this lens, the Sigma 150 to 500. I've used that a lot, and when it was fully extended, it just felt like if I tapped it, it was going to snap in half. It was so just wobbly and really felt quite fragile. This thing, however, doesn't matter what zoom you've got it at, doesn't matter how far extended or what you've got, it just feels like an absolute tank. I reckon you could knock a door down with this. So yeah, it's a pretty chunky beast. It weighs in at about 2 kilos or so. Still massively lighter than sort of the professional primes that it's trying to sort of replace on a budget scale. But it's certainly not the kind of lens you could just happily handhold for an entire day without noticing it. It is possible. It is more than possible. But if you're not used to heavy lenses, this will come as a shock to you. And I know a lot of people have found that. So you might find a lot of people saying it's too heavy or saying, not to buy it because it's too heavy. That's really not a plus or a minus, to be honest. It is what it is. It's a big piece of metal with glass in it. It's going to weigh something. So the lens cap on this is actually like the pro lens caps you get on primes. It's more of a hat, to be honest. It's a cloth thing that goes over the front, and that's pretty much it. Does a pretty good job of protecting the lens. It's padded itself, and I actually kind of like these. It hooks round with a little hole there, it hooks round the hood latch there, so it's not going anywhere, but it does offer some serious protection. So I'm just going to throw that over there. You then have your lens hood. I mean, this thing just oozes quality from the start. You've then got your lens hood, which is, again, metal. Goes on like so and screws on. Once it's on, it's just not going anywhere. It's absolutely rock solid. You could hold it by that, although I wouldn't advise that. The zooming function is really smooth. It's absolutely fine. And there's a zoom lock at every sort of measurement interval. So every mark, you can lock it at that. So 600, 500, 400, 300, 250, 200, 180, and 150. It's got a lot of marks. So yeah, let's just whack it to 600. Put the lock on, and there you go. No slip, no wobble, no movement whatsoever. What's really good about this lock, though, is that if you bash it, it unlocks. So the lock will automatically disengage if it receives a shock. That's a really nice function, because so many of these zoom locks you'll forget about, or you take for granted, and then you'll knock it, and it's just a tiny little plastic pin inside, and it'll snap in half. So that's quite nice. A really fantastic feature of this lens as well, which I overlooked when I bought it. I never thought I'd use it. But you can twist it to zoom it just like that. Or you can grab this rubberized bit here and just use it as a push-pull lens. Now, I knew about this before I bought it and I didn't really care. I didn't see any interest in that until I actually started using this lens. And it's fairly front heavy, which means when you've got your camera here, you'll probably hold it around here. Okay, so you've got your zoom ring here, and you've also got, your nice little rubber bit there. And I just found myself push-pulling, just out of habit. And it's really nice that, it's designed to do that. If you do that on your bog standard lens, you're just going to break it, because it's not designed like that. However, this guy was meant to. So that's a nice feature. And of course, you've got your main lock at 150. Although it's worth noting, the lock doesn't disengage at 150. So if you lock it at the shortest zoom and then try and retch it, you will break it. So try not to do that. Moving on to this tripod colour. Finally, big zoom with a collar that's big enough to hold it by, and you can just carry that around all day. So with your camera on there, you just carry it around, it's absolutely fine. One thing that Sigma have absolutely nailed is you can lock, well, it automatically locks at every 90 degrees with a ball bearing. There we go. So every 90 degrees, it just clicks into place, which is really nice, because for all of you OCD photographers, myself included, it's nice to be able to line it up. It's also nice and quick to sort of get from landscape to portrait if you need to without touching the camera. You've got your focus window there, nothing really new. Now, if we go in on these switches, which you can't really see, just here, that's where this lens starts to get quite interesting. So obviously you've got your focus modes, okay, so you've got autofocus, manual override, and manual focus. You've then got your focus limiter, so you've got the full range, you've got 10 meters to infinity, which basically speeds it up if it starts hunting, and then you've got 2.6 meters to 10 meters. More for close-up work, haven't really found a use for that one. Then you've got your stabilization settings, so you've got off, you've got 1, which is pretty much your generic, image stabilization, just tries to keep it as still as possible, blah, blah, blah. Then you've got OS mode 2, which is their sort of slightly fancier one for when you're trying to chase things. So apparently it works with a little gyroscope inside to try and keep everything sorted vertically, but it allows you to pan. I've found that really useful for trying to track sort of moving birds in low light and cars, motorsport events, things like that. But the thing that sort of sets this lens apart from others, and all of them in the sports line, for example, is that bottom one that says custom. You've got custom 1, custom 2, and off. And of course, if you don't know, the new line of Sigma lenses are customizable. Okay, so what you do is you buy yourself one of these, which is their Sigma USB dock. You take this out, plug it on top of the lens, plug it into your computer, and suddenly you can access your lens's brain. The technology in lenses is coming along really quickly. So all the Sigma art lenses and all the Sigma sport lenses and the contemporary version of this, you can plug them in, and then in those settings you can adjust, with the custom 1 and 2, you can adjust the focus speed, the manual focus speed, the stabilization settings, you can fine tune the autofocus, more on that later. You can really do so much. I might have a quick show and sort of run you through the software when we jump on the computer in a second. But if you're forking out 1,200 quid for this lens, or even 600 quid for the contemporary, get the USB dock. Even if you don't think you need it, you can get it on Amazon for about 30 quid, and it really does open up a few doors, and it will help you out if you ever do have problems. So yeah, this lens is weather sealed, it's dust proof, it's the usual this, that and the other. It's just really well made. Now it's worth noting that this lens is made in Japan. Now its competitors, the Tamron 150-600, the contemporary Sigma, and the Nikon 200-500, whilst they might be very good lenses, they are made in China. Now me being a bit of a sort of old school guy, made in Japan means something. They have much better quality control. The materials used in this lens are phenomenal, and so on. A quick little note as well, if you are thinking about getting this lens, if you're one of those people that really gets fussy about UV filters to protect your lens and just filters in general, this is a one-of-a-kind filter thread of 105 millimeters, which kind of means until some Chinese clone companies get in on there, the only options you've got for filters are Sigma's own brand ones, and they are very expensive and a waste of time if you ask me. For protection and flare reduction, just keep this whopping great big hood on. It's there for a reason. So I've already touched on this briefly, but the usability of this lens is actually really good. A lot of people say it's too heavy, but I just think they're not expecting it to be of this weight. It is still massively lighter than professional 5 or 600mm primes. It weighs about 2.5 kilograms. Once you've got a camera on there and maybe you've got a tripod, yeah, okay, you've got a bit of weight to lug around. But it's not really a pro or a con, it's just something to consider. It is a big lens, and you'd be looking at it if you're looking for a big lens. At the end of the day, 600mm is 600mm. But yeah, besides that, it is actually really usable. With a big lens, so I've a big camera even, I've got a D810 with a battery grip. It is slightly front heavy. A lot of people have said that. With a smaller sort of budget DSLR, it's going to be very front heavy. But again, get yourself a monopod, lean on something, get a tripod. You're not really going to notice. I do think that, you know, when you've actually got the lens up and you've got it here, everything just works. The only thing that's a little bit tricky is the manual focus. The manual focus ring is at the very back. So when you've got a camera here and let's say you're at 600mm and you've got it all the way out over here, trying to get back and manually focus here is a bit tricky because then it is very front heavy. You kind of want your hand around about here. Sometimes you can get away with here, but usually I'll have it sort of almost on the hood and the rest of me here. So it's a bit tricky, but again, each to their own. There are plenty of things you can play around with. Also, the tripod foot does have 3 positions to put a tripod plate or just directly screw a monopod in. So you really can get the balance finely tuned. Right, now before I jump on the computer, just quickly touch on the performance of this lens. This lens is really sharp, okay? Now there's a bit of small print with that sentence. And again, going back to that USB dock, get the dock. When I first got this lens, it had a horrendous focus issue. I didn't realise that it had that issue at the time, so I just thought it was soft as anything. I could not get an in-focus shot. Everything just looked soft, even at f9 or f10. I just thought it was pretty naff. I was almost going to send it back, but then I thought, I bought that USB dock, might as well give it a play. I fine-tuned the focus and now it is absolutely tack sharp. So I need to stress, give this lens a chance. Okay, it's Sigma, it's a third party, it's not going to be lab perfect out of the box. And the fact that they make that USB and have designed it like that, you know, guys, they want you to customize this lens. It's designed that way. Give it a chance. Don't be an idiot like I was. So yeah, it is sharp as nails once you get it finely tuned. I'll show you the difference with a few before and after shots when we jump on the computer. Autofocus speed is fantastic. It focuses perfectly adequate. It's not quite as fast as my 300 prime, nowhere near as fast as a 70 to 200 2.8, but it's certainly faster than the Tamron, the Nikon equivalents. It's actually not bad. The only negative with the autofocus is that at low light, so sort of even if it's just a bit overcast or if you're pointing in the shadows, it does hunt an awful lot. To be fair, they're tricky scenarios for any lens, but this is fastest at 600 at 6.3, so it's not getting as much light as it would like to. It does hunt a bit. However, that's where the focus limiter comes in, you know, that 10 meter to infinity, or you can customize it and make it less than that. It does speed up the process, so instead of having to hunt the entire range, it stops at 10 meters, which is quite nice. The minimum focus distance of this is 2.5 meters. It's not really brilliant for close-up. You can get closer with, well, with a kit lens, really. Okay, so now we're jumping on the Mac just to have a look at a few test shots. What I'll do is I'll just run you through a few sort of findings that I had when I first got this lens, explain the sort of fine-tuning that I did, and then just give you a few sample shots, which obviously I'll put at the end as well, with slightly higher resolution, just so you can see. So when I first got this lens, I took it to a reserve in Scotland and played around with some sort of bird photography, this, that and the other, generic stuff, what you'd use this lens for mostly. Now, one thing that I found straight away, and just looking at these thumbnails, you can see straight away, vignetting. Looking at these guys up the top, the vignetting is heavy. You can see just by the thumbnails, if you just look at those, you can see just around the edges. If I bring them all up, you can see around that. Now, what's interesting about these is these were shot at f8. So this lens was stopped down to f8 and you still get that much vignetting. So I'd like to see less, especially at f8. That's almost a stop lower. But no, you do get vignetting at full zoom. Now, with my 14mm Samyang review, I said how vignetting isn't the end of the world. With a telephoto, it's a little bit different because you're cropping a lot more. your subject might not always be in the centre of the frame. And likewise, you're not in as much control as you are with landscapes. So if you're chasing a bird around the sky or around a forest, you're not always in control. So I'd like to see less vignetting. It's not the end of the world, and it is still very easy to correct. But no, it is certainly there. Now, the biggest thing that I want to stress about this lens is the importance of fine-tuning that focus. Get the USB dock. It's what it's there for. So here are some curlews, okay? Took this shot. Now, you know, I really like curlews, so I was quite excited to get this shot. When I got it back, I zoomed straight in on this guy, okay? Just here. This is the one that I focused on, okay? This is the one that I focused on. Here we are, just here. We'll go full screen. That's the guy I focused on with a single point continuous focus. And it is soft as anything. That is horrific. That is absolutely awful, okay? And that's as far as my thought process went when I first looked back at these photos. I just got annoyed. Okay, I looked at it, soft as anything, that's terrible. Shut down the computer, thought about returning the lens. What's really daft is all I had to do was drag this guy here, look at him. That is a sharp shot. That is a crisp shot. There's insane detail there. That's not the guy I focused on. He was slightly closer. That was the first hint. Okay, so we'll come away from that. Another good example, a cold tit at work. Okay, really small bird. This is maxed out. Again, pushing the camera as well. This is ISO 6,500. You go in here, look at the detail on the feathers, especially at this ISO. That is impressive. However, I always focus on the eyes with animals, and that's not in focus. That's not acceptable. Here's one here just processed slightly so you can see the detail a bit better. And the sharpness is on the wings, but not on the face. Okay, and then last but not least, one of the best examples. Went to Galloway for my birthday. Okay, deer's eye. Okay, focused on the eye. It's soft as anything. The fur just behind it, however, just here, is sharp. So out of the box, guys, my lens front focused. It front focused badly. Okay, so basically that means it focuses on something slightly closer than it actually is. It wasn't soft. It isn't soft. It was just focusing in the wrong place. Now, I plugged it into the USB, did a few fine tunes, did a bit of research to see what other people had done, copied a few settings, did a few of my own. And now, for example, let's just jump in on this guy. That is what I got when I went to a place called Leighton Moss. Just let it render. That's not done yet. Computer's a bit slow. Oh, come on, mate. Look at that. That is a sharp shot, okay? And I could fill this video with more like that. So these guys, these little tufted ducks, sharp as anything. So I really need to stress that you do need to fine-tune this lens sometimes. And again, here's a shot of the moon. This lens is actually really good for shooting the moon and for sort of individual things in the night sky. Being 600 with stabilisation does mean you can get quite creative with your shots. So yeah, and again, the Flying Scotsman, very famous train, came through Carlisle not too long ago. And you couldn't really get close to the track. Now, I have quite a lot of lenses, and this actually meant quite a lot to me. And I really wanted to get a shot, but I didn't know what lens to go for. And being a man of prime lenses, usually, I found it quite new to actually have a zoom that sorted it out. Turned out that 170 was pretty much the perfect focal length. And it was nice just to be able to do that. So it does have its places. And again, this is very high ISOs, 3,500, so it's very noisy, but it is very sharp. It is a very good lens when you get the hang of it. Now, I don't want to stay on here too long, because otherwise I'll waffle on forever. You might have noticed Peppa Pig, world's most famous pig. Probably not. I work at a photography studio, so on the second day of owning this lens, I wanted to really test it. Got it in the studio, put everything to manual focus, really honed in, and Peppa Pig was all I could find. So got it sussed, got the lighting set out, and look at that, 100%, that is absolutely pin sharp. So yeah, you actually can't fault that. You can't fault that at all. It is only a stuffed animal, but you can't fault that. And also, bear in mind, this is primarily for wildlife photographers. Here we have some long-tailed tits. Okay, laugh if you will. tiny, tiny little bird, about the size of a table tennis ball. And it was on the other side of a woodland. But with 600mm and a 36 megapixel sensor, I was able to get shots of them. They're not the best in the world, but they are certainly identifiable. You know, you can certainly look at that and say, yes, that is a long-tailed tit. And on that note of ID shots, another one when I went to a place called Leighton Moss, off in the distance was one of these guys. Now with a 300mm, wouldn't be able to find out what it was. But with a 600mm, you can look at that when it loads. Bloody hell, computer's slow today. Well, it is a hen harrier, basically. So what I'm trying to say is, this lens is also very, very useful for wildlife watching. There we go. Wildlife watching, you know, you can use it for ID shots. They might not be award-winning photos, but they are certainly good enough to identify what you've seen, which is a keen interest for many birders. However, if that is your priority, I would recommend the contemporary lens. It's cheaper, it's lighter, and it will still get good enough photos to identify what you've seen. So yeah, right, I think we'll wrap it up on the computer now. And I'll put just a few sample shots at the very end, just so you can have a look at them if you really want to. But there are plenty online. But yeah, right, let's jump back to it. So all in all, I do think that this is probably the best method of getting 600mm on a DSLR that you can get for the money, to be honest. Although it is twice the price of the Tamron, the Nikon and the contemporary Sigma, I do think it is significantly better. Is it twice the lens? I don't know. But I think if you've got the money, definitely go for it. I would argue that the only improvement over this lens would be to step up to professional primes or a combination of primes and a teleconverter. It is sharp wide open at 600mm at 6.3. It's got image stabilization, it's got a very good focus limiter, it's weather sealed, it's built like a tank. You can't tick all of those boxes, even with some prime lenses. Before I bought this, I was considering getting a 300 2.8 and a teleconverter. Now the only ones in that budget would have been the older ones without VR. With a 2x teleconverter, you're looking at 5.6 wide open. Probably have to shoot it at f8 to get it sharp. And then you've got, for the same price, you know, you're looking at a 600mm shooting at f8 with no VR, or a 600mm shooting at 6.3 with VR, and it's smaller, slightly lighter. You kind of get the idea. Certainly have a look at the Tamron, the Nikon and the contemporary Sigma. If you don't need the best of the best, you can certainly get away with those three. The Nikon obviously being fastest and a fixed aperture at 5.6, making it much better for the teleconverter. If you stick a teleconverter on there, you'll get a 750mm lens, f8 wide open, which is an interesting thing to play around with. I have heard mixed reviews though, so tread with caution. But yeah, I mean, if you've got a local camera shop near you, go and hold one. Go and hold one, take a few test shots, have a look. The biggest thing about this lens is you need to appreciate that it is a big piece of gear. Okay, the most consistent negative feedback that I have heard and read is that it's too heavy. It's not. Okay, Ferraris are fast, Land Rovers are big. They are what they are. This is a big 600mm lens, so it's going to be heavy. If it was lighter, I feel like I was going to break it. So you certainly need to consider that. But no, all in all, I do think I will be keeping this. The only step up, in my opinion, would be moving on to professional primes, which are about 3 or 4 times the price. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic lens. But yeah, if you've got any questions or if I've missed anything out, do drop a comment below. Make sure you hit subscribe as well. I'm going to try and get some more videos on the way as soon as I can. But yeah, feel free to check out Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and all that jazz. I'm fairly active on Facebook at the moment. That's my main social media. But yeah, thanks for watching guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.